Imagine it's 1971. You're a factory worker in Detroit. You have a high school diploma. You work on an assembly line. Your job pays enough to buy a modest home with a 30-year mortgage, enough to raise 2 kids, enough to send at least one of them to college, enough to take a week off in the summer for a family vacation, enough to retire at 65 with a pension that actually pays you. You are middle class, not rich, but secure, stable. You can plan a future and know with reasonable certainty that the future will work out. Now snap forward to 2026. You have a college degree. You have a decent job. You make more money than that factory worker made in 1971, even after you adjust for inflation. But you cannot afford a home in most American cities. You have student debt that will follow you into your 40s. You cannot save money because every dollar you earn goes to rent, insurance, childcare, and healthcare. You cannot retire at 65 because you have no pension and your retirement savings are too small. And you are terrified, absolutely terrified, because you know that one medical emergency, one job loss, one market crash, and everything collapses. That is not the middle class. That is the illusion of the middle class. And the illusion is collapsing. Today, we are going to break down exactly what happened to the American middle class and why, despite making more money than ever before, the average American worker is worse off than their parents were. We are going to walk through the numbers that the politicians do not want you to see. And we are going to explain why the dream that built this country is now mathematically impossible for the majority of people trying to achieve it. If you want to understand the real economic forces that are reshaping America, hit that subscribe button right now. We decode the systems that Wall Street and Washington do not want you to understand. Let's dive in. Let's start with the headline number that encapsulates the entire tragedy. In 1971, 61% of Americans were considered middle class. By 2023, that number had dropped to 51%. That is a 10-point decline over 50 years. Now, you might think, well, that means more people moved up into the upper class, so it is not that bad. Some people did move up. But the majority of that 10-point decline did not move up. They moved down. The middle class was hollowed out from the bottom. People who would have been solidly middle class in the 1970s are now treading water in the lower middle class, or worse. They are hanging on by a thread. And the anchor that held the entire American economy together, the middle class, is now a shrinking island surrounded by a sea of precarious, underpaid workers on one side and a tiny elite of obscenely wealthy people on the other side. This is not the economy that previous generations built. This is something new, something more fragile. But here is the truly cruel part of the story. People are making more money now than they ever did before. A middle-class family in 2026 might earn $200,000 per year. That is an enormous amount of money. Their parents in 1980 made $60,000 per year, which would be roughly $220,000 in today's money. So nominally, they are making the same thing, but they are infinitely poorer. Why? Because the cost of the essentials that define the middle class have exploded in ways that destroy any nominal wage gain. Let's talk about housing first. In 1990, the national home price to income ratio was 3-to-1. That means the average home cost 3 times the average annual household income. So if you made $50,000 a year, a median home cost $150,000. That was achievable. You could get a mortgage. You could own a home by your 30s. By 2024 and 2025, that ratio had jumped to 5-to-1 in the national average. But in major cities, we are talking 8-to-1, 9-to-1, even 10-to-1 in some places. If you make $100,000 a year and the median home costs $800,000 to $1 million, you cannot buy a home. Not in a reasonable time frame. Not without inheriting money from your parents or engaging in some form of financial gymnastics that involves taking on risk that your parents never had to take. An average mortgage payment in 2024 was 40% higher than in 1990 after you adjust for inflation. 40% higher. And that is just the mortgage. That does not include property taxes, which have risen even faster than home prices in many regions. It does not include home insurance, which has skyrocketed due to climate disasters and inflation. It does not include maintenance costs. Your parents bought a home, you cannot. That is the first broken promise. Then there is education. Your parents told you, get a college degree and you will be fine. Get a college degree and you will move into the middle class. That was true in 1980. It was true in 1990. By 2026, it is a lie. College tuition has risen nearly 5% annually for the last 20 years. That is an exponential growth curve. The cost of a 4-year degree from a public university is now over $150,000. At a private school, you are looking at $300,000 or more. This is not an investment anymore. This is a debt sentence. A student graduates with a 4-year degree and $150,000 in student loans. Their entry-level job pays $60,000 per year. They are spending 25% of their gross income just servicing that debt. They cannot save money. They cannot buy a home. They cannot start a business. They cannot take risks. They are locked into the system. And unlike their parents, who could pay their way through college with a summer job, they have no choice. Go into debt or do not go to college and be locked out of the middle class entirely. That is not a choice. That is a trap. And then there's healthcare. Healthcare costs have outpaced almost every other consumer expenditure in America. The lifetime cost of quality healthcare for an average person is now estimated at over $400,000. $400,000. That is not including extraordinary costs like cancer treatment or cardiac surgery. That is just baseline healthcare for an average person living an average lifespan. Your parents had employer-sponsored healthcare. You have employer-sponsored healthcare, but the deductibles have exploded. The copays have exploded. The out-of-pocket maximums have exploded. And if you lose your job, you lose your healthcare. If you get sick and cannot work, you lose your income and your healthcare simultaneously. It is a catastrophic vulnerability that your parents did not face. So let's do the brutal math. A house that costs $800,000, student debt of $150,000, lifetime healthcare costs of $400,000, childcare for 2 kids for 15 years, which costs roughly $200,000, a retirement that needs to last 30 years, which requires roughly $1 million in savings. That is roughly $2,500,000 in total expenses that the middle-class family needs to cover. But it gets worse. You also need to save money for emergencies. You need to maintain a car. You need to eat food. You need to pay property taxes and income taxes. When you add it all up, the full American dream, the dream that your parents told you was attainable if you worked hard, now costs roughly $5 million over a lifetime. $5 million. To achieve this dream today, you effectively need to be a dual income household where both partners have college degrees and are in the top 20% of earners. For the single earner middle class family of the 1960s and 70s, this is now a pure fantasy. It is not possible, not unless you inherit money or make decisions that would have been considered insane a generation ago. But here is where the story gets really dark. Workers are not just being crushed by rising costs. They are also being robbed of their productivity gains. Since 1979, worker productivity has increased by over 80%. 80%. That means an average worker in 2026 is producing 80% more value than a worker in 1979. 80% more. But hourly compensation, adjusted for inflation, has only grown by about 30%. The gap between what workers produce and what workers earn has become an abyss. And all of that missing 60%? It did not disappear. It went somewhere. It went to the top 1% and to corporate shareholders. Technology was supposed to make life easier. Automation was supposed to free us from drudgery. And it did. But the benefits did not go to workers. The benefits went to the owners of capital. The owner of a factory in 1980 got paid for owning the factory. The owner of a factory in 2026 with robots gets paid hundreds of times more because the robots are making money for them while they sleep. The worker who used to run that factory now drives for Uber. And this brings us to the most insidious part of modern American economics. The wealth gap has become a chasm. The top 1% of households hold 30.5% of all U.S. wealth. The bottom 50% hold only 2.5%. That ratio is obscene. But it is worse than the number suggests. The wealth of the top 1% is held in stocks and assets that generate more money. When the stock market goes up, a billionaire gets richer automatically. The wealth of the middle class is held in their home, which is an expense. A home does not generate money. It costs money to maintain. It costs money to insure. It costs money in property taxes. Your net worth is tied up in something that is bleeding you dry. When the stock market goes up and your home appreciates in value, you feel richer. You see your net worth increase on paper. But you cannot spend it. You cannot eat it. You cannot use it to pay your bills. You are trapped in the mirage of wealth. Meanwhile, the billionaire cashes in their stocks and actually has more money to spend. Now, you might wonder, how did we get here? The answer is that the American economy underwent a fundamental restructuring starting in the 1970s. In 1960, manufacturing was 34% of total U.S. employment. 34%. These were high-paying union jobs with benefits and pensions. A high school graduate could walk into a factory at 18 and spend 40 years there, earn a decent salary, and retire with a pension. By 2026, manufacturing is less than 10% of employment. We traded those jobs for service jobs, gig economy jobs, contract work, jobs with no benefits, no security, no pension. You cannot build a middle-class life on Uber shifts. You cannot build a middle-class life on contract work where you are one job away from financial ruin. The manufacturing floor that anchored the middle class is gone, and nothing has replaced it. But the cruelest trick of all is the illusion that has been sold to replace that security. The illusion of debt. U.S. household debt hit record highs in 2024 and 2025, exceeding $17 trillion. 17 trillion. And this is not just credit card debt. It is mortgages. It is student loans. It is auto loans. It is medical debt. It is personal loans. It is every form of borrowing that a middle-class person has to engage in just to achieve the lifestyle their parents had. Your parents paid for their house in cash or with a modest mortgage. You are mortgaged to the hilt. Your parents paid for college out of pocket. You are drowning in student debt. Your parents went to the doctor and paid the bill. You are financing healthcare with credit cards. The middle class is not living the dream. The middle class is financing the dream. They are using credit to maintain a lifestyle that their stagnant wages cannot support. And the moment that credit becomes unavailable, the moment that interest rates stay high, the moment that a recession hits and employers start laying people off, the entire house of cards collapses. We are one economic shock away from a catastrophe that will make 2008 look like a warm-up act. So here we are in 2026. The middle class is shrinking. Wages have stagnated in real terms. The costs of the essentials, housing, education, healthcare, have exploded beyond recognition. Workers are more productive than ever, but they are earning less of the fruits of that productivity. Wealth inequality has reached levels not seen since the Gilded Age, and the entire system is being held together by debt, by credit, by the hope that interest rates stay low and the economy keeps growing and nothing goes wrong. But something always goes wrong. A pandemic hits, a war erupts, a financial crisis strikes. And when it does, the middle class, which is already hanging on by a thread, will face a reckoning. The question is not whether the American middle class is disappearing. The question is how long it will take for the illusion to completely shatter. If you found this breakdown of middle class economics valuable, smash that like button. It tells the algorithm that people care about the real economics behind the political theater. And subscribe if you want to understand the economic forces that are reshaping America and the world. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the middle class can be saved, or is this decline inevitable? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.